Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Saturday broadcast at the virtual session at the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. Before we start every Saturday, we always start off with reading a short message from Happy Life or other inspirational books and open up with a prayer just to set the tone for this evening. So this is on page 134 of Happy Life. The youth of your body is fleeting. Utilize it to store up eternal values. The green of the years passes quickly, but the commitments made extend for a whole existence. Be careful with them. The good commitments will be sentinels on your journey, blessing your hours, and the bad ones will turn into pitiless collectors, disturbing your peace. Place signposts of light along the way to indicate the ground you have covered. Stay young at any age through a conscious without remorse and correct conduct. Wonderful reminders from our dear Joanna DeAngelis. So join me now in our opening prayer as we lift our thoughts to our divine Creator, our Father, Mother God. We thank you so much for the blessing of this moment to connect with our spirit friends and our spiritual family and those of like-minded thoughts and ideals from across the globe. In gratitude also to all the pioneers that have come before us, that have paved the way, for allow us to have access to all of this knowledge. And we ask, dear God, that you especially bless our speaker, Leo, this evening. May he be inspired and be a vessel for the good and noble spirits. And may all those who are connected to us in this presentation this evening, may they receive your heavenly blessings, your solace, and your warmth, dear Creator. We thank you, and so be it. All right, dear friends. Well, today we have Leo coming back again with us to study again more chapters in this book. Chapters 2 and 3. Leo, I don't want to take up any more of your time, so I'm going to go ahead and let you get to it.
Hello, everyone, and just give me a moment here as we try to sort out some issues here. Just hang in there, and we will be coming back soon here to talk with one another and do what we're supposed to do. Hang in there. Don't save. All right, so I need to go back here. As usually happens, right, when we are trying to do a good work or try to lead uh, something that will free our minds from the difficulties of every day, guess what? Technology and all kinds of crazy things gets on the way, but that's okay. There's nothing. Um, and I ask for forgiveness for the flickering camera. I don't know what's going on there, but we'll try to, um, get ourselves together here and do our presentation as we're supposed to. It happened.
Some
It,
might say it's the Matrix, Leo. It's
right.
flickering.
I already turned it off and turn it back on, but it is what it is. We'll stick with
Yeah,
what we have and not really worry about anything that is uh, beyond the message today. Give me 1 second. I just want to make sure that I share here.
sure.
Share screen, and it will be this lovely guy over here. All right, perfect. Okay. So, thank you everyone for bearing with us as we go through this bumpy start over here. It's okay, it's nothing to worry about. And as Kirsten was saying, giving continuation to this amazing work by Manuel de Miranda and Divaldo Franco. As you can see, today we'll be covering chapters 3 and 4. Uh, Before we get into that, I would like to first of all share with you, my excitement about this work, because it is as if it is actually not as if, but it is, Manuel de Miranda describing what's going on with us right now, right? Unlikely the other two other works that they presented to us, planetary transition and on the way to a planet of regeneration. I'm sorry, the dawn of a new era. Right here, we see that it was events that actually happened, prior to us, right? And I always like to remind ourselves of this, because there is a catch to that. And at the end of our conversation to today, we will touch based on this beginning, this slightly hint that I'm giving it to you, which is what is about to come. But it's happening, right? It's still happening. We're talking about the development of the coronavirus, what has happened, what we know. Today, we're going to touch on some of these aspects as well. But what happens in behind the scenes, right? On what we cannot see, especially us or who are not ostensive mediums, right? There's no way for us to see. I mean, we can feel it. We'll connect or not, and we're going to talk about it, to higher minds, but we'll also connect with negative minds who actually partake in the madness that is going on, right? And that's up to us to change. And I think this message today will be, first and foremost, to alert us in this manner. And I think that's why we have the flickering camera. That's why we have the different issues that has happened. As we were saying before, I want to just get the book, because there are a couple things that we want to reference back to the book here. As we were saying before, we have covered the introduction, that talked about the introduction, given an idea of what this book will be about, the alarm buggles, and establishing tasks, right? Pretty much the preliminary work. We went through this, if I can say this way, the state of our planet right now, right? With in regards to what's going on, where we came from, the reasons, which pretty much sets the tone, and the reasons why, gives us the reason why we are here now, and also what's going to happen to us, depending on how we behave, on how we connect with one another, right? And today, obviously, we will talk about adjusting to new lodgings, and activities overview. So adjusting to new lodgings, as we have seen on planetary transition and dawn of new era, is mainly Manuel Miranda, Mr. Miranda, going to the location where they're going to establish themselves to conduct the work. It is in the physical. Part is in the physical realm, part is in the spiritual realm, right? Every location, on planet Earth, there is a connection with the beyond, right? I know you may be thinking, wait a minute, yeah, I knew that about Spiritist Center, but our house is also has a location with the spiritual world. Number one, our mentors. Number two, the mentors of our family. Sometimes there could be, a group of mentors working with us, right? For sure, it's a group of people, a group of spirits, because I have a mentor, my partner, my kids, they have their mentors who have been working with them for, several reincarnations, right? And we can call guardian angels, whatever that may be. So the new lodging, the new location where Mr. Miranda and a group of people and the guide of the work, right, the head of the work, will be staying at a Spiritist center that is connected, has an extinction in this spiritual realm. Activities overview, he will be talking about, Mr. Miranda and some of the workers will be talking about, what is going to happen and how they will act and what their intentions are in terms of the work they would like to do from the spiritual realm connected with the physical realm, right? Us, incarnated ones. So let us dive into this these teachings because it's very enlightening, and it really calls our attention to many aspects, right? Adjusting to new knowledge lodgings. Mr. Miranda then starts by, in the poetic, calling our attention to nature, right? It's always good to remind ourselves of this. Upon arrival, we immediately headed to the institution that would serve as the headquarters for our activities. The location was very pleasing, close to the sea, allowing us to benefit from the emanations of the ocean, the ocean, the glow of the plankton at night, and the sap of trees that are of great aid with regards to human per spiritual constitution. And again, the reason we bring this is because nature is important for all of us. Nature is not just for us to appreciate in terms of, oh, that's a beautiful tree, it's sunny outside, or it's cloudy, or it's there's this very beautiful green area. Let's go ahead and just sit down and enjoy at a picnic, right? It's beyond that. Nature has a great impact on our lives, and we also impact obviously nature. And it's important for us to remind ourselves of this because it is through these different environments that the spirits also connect with God, number one, and through, in connecting with God, as well as extracting energies that are necessary for them to continue their work, to do what they're supposed to do, right? These elements on nature brings us several, let's say, nourishments that we need to go on. So it's important for us to connect whichever level way we can to these elements. And I say this because perhaps one may like the cold weather, to be outside. One may like the summer. One may like the spring. Whatever that may be, we need to find within ourselves and around us the best way possible to connect with nature, thus connecting with God as well. It's not by chance that these spirits, when they say something, there's a meaning behind, and we need to really rescue this when we're reading these chapters. Well designed gardens display a variety of flowers, which gave away the fragrances, while myriads of insects flew around in the sacred process of life under the vibrational assistance of the elementals. This is we kept this, and we found very interesting that he mentioned this to us. And then there is actually a footnote where Dr. Miranda points out that this is related to question 536 of the Spirits book, when Kardec actually asked the spirits, are the great phenomena of nature those considered as perturbations of the elements due to fortuitous causes, or do they all have a providential purpose? And the answer of the spirits is, everything has a reason for being, and nothing occurs without God's permission. It cannot be otherwise. God does not act directly on nature, but has devoted agents on every degree of the world's scales. We didn't bring this on, but again, this is just to explicitly, call our attention that these elements, or the elementals, or whatever we want to call the mosquitoes, right? They're not there to make us unhappy, right? They're not there just to, create noises. It's very interesting that I live in a semi-rural area in Westminster, Maryland, and during the summer, anything after 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, well, I should say during the summer, it gets dark a little bit later. I don't mind, but some people have mentioned to me that it's kind of noisy. You hear the frogs, you hear all kinds of insects going on, the birds, and all those things. Some people get upset with it, and I'm like, no, I love this. This is amazing, right? This is nature talking to us, is God talking to us, is life, right? Repeating itself to ourselves, to us. And it's important for us to take in consideration that perhaps we may not understand, but it is important for all of us. There is an importance, and most importantly, a reminder that God is in control, and who are we to say that this or that is not important for us? The premises were part of a Spiritist community, dedicated to the elimination of consciences and moral edification through the study of Kardec's Spiritist codification. Fraternal assistance was carried out in that same space, extended both to the incarnate shattered by the existential difficulties and the discarnate sufferers, among whom we notice perverse adversaries of people that were ill, as well as enemies in particular processes of mutual persecution. So we see this two-way work here, right? Not only making reference of the to the idea that the Spiritist Center, this location was working on both realms of life, but also helping individuals who are persecuted and those who are persecuting, right? So the work is for all of us. It's not just for the individuals who is being quote unquote point out as a victim, but the victors as well, because we never know, and we're not here to judge, but we don't know what has happened in the past for that individual to be in that position. The administrator of the lodgings reserved for us was a very nice lady, about 60 years of age, who worked with visitors that frequently stayed in the Spiritist community. Many of them arrived with special tasks to serve the community itself, while others were brought in for spiritual training, particularly with the newly discarnated. Right? So then this lady actually guided them into the facility that they would be staying, so they later on would meet with other minds as well. I would like to point out that throughout this chapter, Mr. Miranda also makes reference to the elegance not only of the location, but also the uh, how organized the location is, right? The work is organized. You see, he mentions that everybody seems to be busy working on both realms of life, but there is organization, there's love, there's kindness, right? And we're going to see a little bit more of this, but it really amazes me because every now and then when we read these passages again, we just kind of cut through or browse through these teachings and we don't really apply in our lives, right? And this could actually be to the extent of what are we doing, when we get up in the morning, right? What are our first thoughts or our first feelings, right? And then how do we conduct ourselves? How do we treat the material around us? How do we organize ourselves so that we're not feeling overwhelmed, right? So all of these things, it's important for us to um, to be reminded, so that we also take the examples that are brought to us here and then apply in our lives. And there is a once more, we're going to connect with this idea later on. A normal school, a temple of faith, a research lab, wherever services to elevate society are carried out, become blessed sanctuaries of love and the good, looked after by kind spirits, placed there as guardians to fend off the instruction of idlers, deceivers, and troublemakers. Then he continues by saying, and there is a reason why this is read. Once human perception expands further, penetrating the various vibrational layers between the physical and the spirit world, it will enable the knowledge that life does not stop, that the idea of empty spaces is a result of the insufficiency of human senses. Would like to just pause right here and kind of take a look of this first paragraph here on this slide. Anything, any condition that we create, and I say condition is thoughts, feelings that we preserve inside of us that are good, becomes something noble, right? We all know this. It's very trivial. It's very um, it, a very easy concept to understand and to grasp, right? I mean, if we're thinking positive, guess what? We're going to connect with positive things. But when we extend this to in our lives, in our routines, and in our environment, right? Guess what? As it's saying here, it becomes a an elevated location or sanctuary, blessed sanctuary, it's saying here. And we can do this to our homes. It's not necessarily just the Spiritist Center. It's not just necessarily the a church, a place of worship, right? It can be done this in one room of our houses, the second room and the bathroom, the kitchen, every location. And it's interesting because Mr. Miranda actually starts by contemplating the garden, right? The outside. And one of the first things that we notice when we get into a home is what? The the first steps of the home, right? The outside of the home. Whether you live in a home or perhaps in a condo or an apartment, when you have that welcome mat in front of the house that says welcome, right? That or has a beautiful picture. Some of us like to change, during the seasons as well, which is a beautiful thing, for us to kind of get into the spirit, right? But you see the organization, you see how well treated it is, it's welcoming. And then if that is truly what we're trying to do, and if that is very persistent within ourselves, we see that the extension of that welcoming mat, that beautiful garden inside of the house as well. Because we start thinking, well, if I'm treating of the outside, guess what? I'm going to treat of the inside as well. And that can go both ways. If we start thinking well, feeling well, then we're going to start thinking about, you know what? I don't like the clutter around me anymore. I don't like to see that things are not in its place anymore, right? And then we start changing the whatever it's inside of us and outside, or outside inward, right? It can go both ways, and it's just something that we'd like to point out because this is how we're going to connect more with these higher minds, because these higher minds, they preserve and they like the idea of order, right? It's not order in terms of being demanding, but invitational for us to live a better life, a more easy life. And this idea of the human perception expanding, it's important for us to connect as well. And again, at the end of this talk tonight, we will really emphasize on this a little bit further. But it's for us to connect with these higher minds. If it's for us, it's meant for us to really expand on this idea that higher minds are right next to us. It depends on us to connect with them. After a few minutes, Marta informed us that the institution's spiritual mentor, a disciple of the Saint of Assisi, was waiting for us. The room where he welcomed us was simple, without adornments, except a picture on the wall of Saint Francis of Assisi kissing a leper at the times he was still aspiring to become a knight in the world. And then this friend is Gracindo, the brother Gracindo, who greeted them kindly, explained that following the guidance of the Povoredo, in this case, for San Francis of Assisi, he had been at the helm of the institution since its foundation. He further conveyed that the current situation worried him greatly, based on the somewhat alarming medical predictions for the pandemic, as well as the spiritual information that had recently reached him. For some months now, humanity benefactors had come to realize the terrible onslaught of the strange virus, seemingly developed in a lab using the common strain of influenza, whose harm would persist on Earth for more than 2 years, surprising the duration of the Spanish flu. So, taking consideration that this was actually brought to us around 2020, here we are in this, development of 2 years or a little bit more, depending or where we want to put a mark on this. That we are, again, living the consequences of the pandemic that we are still going through, in kind of fading away little by little. Thank God. But he continues by saying he talked about the charity to be extended to patients, and for that matter, to all sufferers in the process of evolution, conveying directly to Spinelli that he could count on all services of the institution at any time and without prior authorization. Remember, I want to just go back here and say that Brother Gracindo is actually the mentor of the spiritual part of this home, where they're staying, right, in the spirit realm that is connected with the work and the group of or spiritist houses, spirit location workers in the physical realm. Clearly designated for the task, Spinelli explained that this was his first time in an activity of this nature, that so far he had been emotionally concerned to Brazil's southern region, endeavoring the expansion of Spiritism and its incomparable activities. And we're going to see a picture of Spinelli here. As you may remember, Spinelli is actually the head of the group that Mr. Miranda is part of it, right? He was a very good activist in terms of I shouldn't say activist, but a good worker, spiritist work in Brazil. That and he focused, as you can see here, mainly in the south part of Brazil. He was he was Italian, and he actually moved to Brazil at a young age, and he learned about Spiritism. He studied Spiritism, and he actually conducted many works, Spiritist works in Brazil. And now he's being called to actually work in this endeavor of bringing comfort to people who are going through or facing the difficulties connected with COVID-19 or coronavirus. Brother Gracino then asked two of his assistants to show us the grounds of the beautiful institution. And then he again, as we were saying earlier, and then I think it's important for us to highlight this. He talks about the organization, what their mission in this location. The institution's specific mission was concentrated on education. The Saint of Assisi, however, had also recommended that the children of Calvary, as Jesus called them, those suffering the vicissitudes of physical decline and abandonment, should not be forgotten. Right? Not only the sanitation, housekeeping routines, and other specialized sectors, the medical, the dental, pharmaceutical, lab, and normal delivery facilities caught our attention, but also the overall joy and pleasant psychosphere generated by volunteers and employees, perfectly aware that love is the greatest preventive and curative therapy. It begs us again to connect with these idea guys. And we're not talking about heaven. We're not talking about you know something that is not completely unattainable. It is. I mean, it's not easy to establish this organization. It's not easy to establish minds or connect minds to do the same work and to be as predisposed to do the work of kindness. But it's something doable, right? It's definitely not easy. And in first and most importantly, it's important for us to really connect with this message and say, how can I do this in my life? How can I establish this in my home? Right? If we're a part of a spiritist center, how can we uh, present ourselves this way? When I say present, is actually do the work. It's not just saying, "Oh, I'm so nice," or be of a person who only speaks about it but doesn't do anything about it. And this is one of the things. These are one of the things that, as we were reading this, as we were working to present this, we're thinking about, wow, what an amazing place, right? That's why we put this beautiful garden here as well. That reminds of so much of this. Beautiful organization, right? Connection with God. We were later informed that this selfless spirit had worked directly with the gentle Father Francis, that his involvement in this current endeavor came from his love for some of the reincarnated spirit, as they were part of a group he intended to lead back to Jesus. This is really interesting because many of the spirits that are working here with Mr. Miranda, as we have seen in the past, has a greater purpose than just say, okay, as we're gonna, I'll jump ahead of myself here. We're gonna see that there is a virologist here in the picture, right? Actually helping and giving some information about the coronavirus. But a lot of them had a connection in the past. They either suffered through a pandemic, they either went through a severe trial, right? Or let's say expiation. And some of them work directly with higher minds, like Father Francis, as he's saying here. But when he says that as they were, this man, Brother Gracindo, he is interested in helping or leading back souls, spirits back to Jesus. There is a connection there. Yes, many of these high spirits, they 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 let's say they accept the challenge, if or maybe we can say the opportunities to to help others, right? But there is a connection there, and perhaps the he's um, longevity in this place tells us that perhaps there are a lot of souls that he was connected in the past that still are still in need of help, right? And what this has, all of this to has to do with us, to do with our lives, because sometimes we connect with people in such a way that it we kind of question, right? I mean, why? What is my connection with this individual? What is my connection with, the town that I'm in, or the connection with the school, the work that I do? What's the purpose? And we don't find direct reasons or answers for it, but it's rooted all the way back there, right? It's rooted in such a way that it's beyond our comprehension, and sometimes we get upset with it, and it's okay to get upset. And it's in this moment of upsetness that if we're truly curious about ourselves and our situation, we will find the reasons, and we'll calm ourselves and think, if God allowed me to be here or wants me to be here, there's a lesson for it, right? Not only for other individuals, but most importantly for ourselves. So just something interesting that crossed our minds that we were working and going through this passage here. It also touched us to see that the practice of mediumship with Jesus was maintained and exemplified at the institutions with the respect and high regard it deserves, with the Christian principles recommended by Kardec. Here again, the red font. Thanks to human beings' intellectual and moral development, as they become more receptive to beauty and reflection, they also acquire more perception of the so-called paranormal phenomena, enabling a better attunement to the subtle vibrations that surround them. Over time, through the increased exercise of mediumistic capabilities, the phenomena will become normal, making this delicate physical sense more refined and transcendental. Once more, it is up to us to, I think one of the interesting point over here is that he says, thanks to human beings' intellectual and moral development, because we tend to associate, spirituality. We tend to associate mediumship to the moral development. Yes, there is a lot of moral development on it, because it is a tool that we can use for the good, for the bad. Um, but it's also interesting to see intellectual, right? So when we talk about perhaps technology, right? Will technology help us in the future in ways that we don't know, in terms of us establish more accurate, more effective connections with the beyond? We don't know. And this is just a one way to explore the idea of intellectuality. But when we go to school, when we learn something, the idea is to create a high level of discernment towards a specific topic, right? So intellectuality in this case here will help us guide ourselves in this uh, growth, moral growth as well, because of our capabilities to understand the topic a little bit more, or to be more open for new ideas too. But to say the least, is it's important for us to develop this connection with the beyond, so that things becomes more refined, so our connection becomes more refined and transcendental as well. At the institution, we experience a vibrant world with movement and powerful resources, which nonetheless went unnoticed to those who lived or worked in its various bustling sectors. Could it be two worlds in perfect harmony, or just one world with two fields of perception? This is very philosophical, right? And it makes us wonder when we're reading about these things. It's like, is it two worlds? is it truly two worlds, right? Can we assimilate this as the incarnate and the discarnate, two different, worlds? And yes, to an extent we can, but at the same time, it's just the separation of the physical body, and I would also add that is the our perception that is not well refined to see the bigger picture, right? Especially for us incarnated ones, it's really hard for us to understand this. And then it brings the virologist, right? Our friend Eudalbo, and I know we have trouble by saying this name, even though it's a Portuguese name, and it's the first time that I actually see it. So just bear with me there. One of the members of our group who had been a virologist in his last reincarnation whispered gently, "It is the hours of the Angelus, of prayer praising Mary, the Holy Mother, in the room dedicated to the munistic activities, to where we are now heading." So imagine, you're in this moment contemplating everything, and somebody comes to you, "Let us pray," right? Let us have a moment of prayer, right? And then he actually called up everyone to this location. Dr. Eudalbo, introduced to us before we started this journey, had been an eminent and dedicated virologist on the earth. He had visited this institution several times, enjoying great respect from its members due to his contributions relating to less lethal viruses spread out throughout this century and still flaring up sporadically. So, what happens here? Brother Gracindo then opened the meeting with a moving prayer, after which he asked Spinelli, here it is, Spinelli, as we mentioned earlier, to open the Gospel according to Spiritism by Allan Kardec and read a paragraph. Interesting enough, as we usually do in our works at the SSB, we open sporadically the Gospel according to Spiritism, and anyone can do this at home, at your place of work, if you can, at home, whatever, and read a passage. But he opened sporadically in this passage, chapter 6, item 2, where it says, "All types of suffering, misery, disappointment, physical pain, loss of loved ones, find their consolation in faith, in the future, and in trust in God's justice, which Christ came to teach humankind. On the other hand, upon those who expect nothing after this life, or who simply doubt, afflictions bear down with all their weight, and no hope comes to soften their heart, their bitterness. This is what led Jesus to say, 'Come unto me, all of you who are weary, and I will comfort you.'" So then Spinelli goes into make some comments about this passage. I'm not going to read this with you right now. I would like to reserve the 3 or 4 paragraphs that he talks about this passage here for us at the end as our prayer. It's very enlightening. It's very kind as well, his words. So I would like to utilize this as our prayer for the end of our session today. And I'll give you the reference on in terms of what page it is in the book as well. But it's really interesting, and we also finalize this chapter by saying, bringing what Mr. Miranda says, that Brother Gracindo considered the gravity after Spinelli gives his words about this passage, saying that he considered the gravity of the moment on the earth, acknowledging everyone's concern regarding the pandemic, which now, due to its aggressiveness, sorry about the typo there, had become terribly evident, surprising the so-called civilized world that in reality was still somewhat primitive. This is not Leo saying, this is actually the mentor of the home, actually reminding us. He mentioned the exploiters that would take advantage of the painful circumstance to increase death and dishonor, but also that we should remain focused in our commitments of love and charity as a response to the planetary plea for mercy from the compassionate heavens. So again, they're aware of it, they know what's going on, and they're doing the work. And it's a rhetorical question that we can, apply to ourselves later on, and to say, are we connecting with these minds? Are we paying attention to this higher work? Or am I so caught up in the middle of the whole thing, right? Or we, uh, because now some months have gone by, that we didn't pay attention to this at all, right? I like to say that, for myself, that I did. Yeah, there were moments of despair. There were moments that I was thinking, where are we going to go with this? There were moments of indignation where we looked at it, and it says, we haven't learned yet, right? But there are concerns. There are concerns from, from the higher up, in terms of higher spirits. But the way they deal with it is how, we, the lesson here. Instead of wasting their time with, things that are not going to help, or thoughts or feelings, or even actions, directly, they try to transcend, in their own ways, and which is something that we have to learn, to get themselves out of the, or all of us, out of this situation. So that's the idea there, that I would like to finalize this chapter and move on into chapter 4, where now we're going to be, changing gears here to the activities overview. We're a little bit of, pressed with time here. I did just notice. Oh my goodness, time flies when you're having fun. And then, Miss Miranda says that same night, under the beautiful canopy of a large tree and a sky of shining stars, we met to discuss our future activities on the earth during the bitter days of the pandemic. And again, talking, connecting with nature. After a silent prayer in which we nourish ourselves with the emanation of prana and the trees in the moonlight, Dr. Eudalbo enlightened us. And then Eudalbo, the virologist here, talks about the what's happening, and extensively as well about the coronavirus. He says the following: Here we are, gathering in a special group alongside the workers of light and love for the purpose of helping our struggling brothers and sisters in their process of evolution. More cruel than a war, the pandemic will reap hundreds of thousands of lives, some by the natural processes of moral transformation of the earth towards a world of regeneration, while others will be exiled to another orb after a period of convalescence in communities in the spirit world. They will no longer breathe the atmosphere of Mother Earth, who they poison with their outrageous and rebellious behavior. So we're talking about two groups of people here. One is the individuals who are disconnecting, from the physical body because of the issues that we have going through, right, in terms of the pandemic, that they will be able to reincarnate on planet Earth. And the second, group of people, that unfortunately, because they're, the way they vibrate, their thoughts, their feelings, they will not be able to reincarnate on planet Earth anymore, and they will be given the opportunity to reincarnate on another planet. Um, uh, I would say not as well evolved as planet Earth, right? But they will be given the opportunity to go to those locations to apply what they have learned here. However, morally speaking, they're going to be, leveled off with the individuals of that planet, right? The way they vibrate, much like the way we connect ourselves, when we enter our cars. If you're, attuning to, rock music, right? What are you going to listen to? You're going to tune in to that station that plays rock. Or if you play, classical music, right? If you like classical music, you will tune in to that, radio station that plays classical music. It's all about, our emanations, the way we tune with the world. And it's getting to a point now, to the highest point of our evolving process, that we will no longer be given the opportunity to reincarnate here if we're not vibrating in the same level as Earth is vibrating, or the moment of transitions, as we have mentioned here several times. Viruses are one of the most complex chapter among the, organisms existing on the earth. Many were unknown until the 19th century, when Louis Pasteur, investigating rabies, found that a microorganism was transmitted after the bite of the affected animal. but there was no way to verify it. It started one of the greatest investigations to identify the microscope agents of diseases, although it was later found that some are single or double stranded, a bit long for their proportion. Today, there are more than 200,000 of these terrible infectious agents. Their structure is very simple, and subsequently, it was discovered that they can be manipulated in labs, presenting mutations that generate immense difficulties for the manufacturing of the vaccines to fight them. So then he goes into the explanation of the coronavirus, right? How it is, how it acts, how do we prevent ourselves, how do we, I'm sorry, how do we protect ourselves in terms of really making sure that we're cleaning hands, washing hands, showering and doing all the things that we have heard, but also making sure that we're keeping distance depending on how we, if we have been affected from those who are affected as well, and the time that it takes for our bodies to adjust and not transmit anymore the coronavirus. And then this is Miss Miranda saying, we were deeply interested in getting to know better this enemy of physical life, which finds supportive energy in human beings' moral and spiritual conduct. Now we're going to shift a little bit into the not only the physical but the spiritual component of the pandemic as well. Interestingly, interestingly, he continued in a calm voice. It's not fatal in animals towards the end, which can often be transmitters. Often be transmitters, as it is the case of the bat in the history of the current tragedy. Mental balance, unconditional trust in God, prayer filled with love, actions of charitable nature produce the antibodies that prevent easy contagion. Even so, some painful and unfortunate cases will occur, striking doctors, nurses, and beloved family members due to the imperatives of the sovereign laws of life. I'll repeat this again, folks. Mental balance, unconditional trust in God, prayer filled with love, actions of a charitable nature produce the antibodies that prevent easy contagion or contamination here. Even so, some painful and unfortunate cases will occur, striking doctors, nurses, and beloved family members due to the imperatives of the sovereign laws of life. In this case, folks, if we're mentally balanced, which none of us are 100%, and I recognize that, and I put myself in this position, right? But we're doing the best to to connect with what's best in the universe, right? Unconditional trust in God, giving it to God. Prayer filled with love, actions of charitable nature towards one another will produce the antibodies that we need, not only towards the coronavirus, but any other virus, any other disease as well. Yeah, there are certain situations, as he's saying here, that God calls us uh, to the other side. There's nothing that we can do to avoid it, right? It's just a nature part of nature, right? Our time will come that we perhaps have to be on the other side, but I like to think that perhaps if that happens, and for us who have lost loved ones, those that led a righteous and good life and were able to do some or all of these things that he's mentioned here, were called for a specific reason, right? And I think that we can all connect again with this positive aspect if we have unconditional trust in God. He felt silent. And then Spinelli, who is the head of the group that Dr. Miranda is part of it, start explaining how they were going to approach the cases by saying, our job is to inspire individuals and maintain a healthy conduct, not a healthy life, a health conduct in general, to embrace the safety guidelines proposed by health authorities, to keep an upright moral behavior, and a peaceful domestic coexistence. Very important here, a peaceful domestic coexistence. To develop solidarity and respect, along with the cooperation and bonding with the spirit world, because physical life is always temporary. for many of us, we have come across individuals, couples who unfortunately divorced. And this is not only husband and wife, partners, but also friends as well. They're living together, and then all of a sudden they couldn't stand anymore. Not only one another, but sometimes themselves. And it's tough because we saw this happening. We still see it, and I want to take this to another level, because we have to take in consideration that the consequences of the pandemic has not hit us yet, right? So it's important for us to remind ourselves of this. Needless to say, at this time of collective trials and testimonies programmed by life, the gates have been open in regions of darkness and pain in the spirit world, where perverse spirits endure deep sufferings. Upon their return to the earth, they unleash unfounded revenges, terrible persecutions, fomenting crime and evil behaviors. So it's like feeding fuel to the fire, right? The let's see, the less evolved spirits, when they see that that we are going through this turmoil, they like to add more fuel to it, and they partake on the difficult moments that we're going through, right? Instead of helping, if we're not attuning to the higher minds, we're going to attune with them, and we'll connect with them, and they will create more issues in our lives. Thus, many cruel spirits' obsession they were not able to impose before are now possible, as they take advantage of a chaotic world to worsen human beings' physical condition, spreading their hideous influence in processes of depletion of energies and disenchantment, with life. It's mainly sucking our energies, like taking our energies. And sometimes we feel drenched, right? We have felt at one point of our lives during these past 2 years, drenched at times. It's like, I can't take it anymore. I cannot even listen anymore about this thing. And then we have to wear masks, and then we have to do this, and then we have to isolate. We want to see our family members, right? And despair sets in. And guess what? We're then connecting with these minds over here, unfortunate minds. Unfortunately, frivolous individuals on the earth are up in arms against the restrictions and rules imposed by worrisome authorities, hesitant in making the correct decisions, wrangling for the rewards of official positions without any real concern for people's health. Faulty statistics, malevolent attitudes, and propaganda spreading through the scheming of false information aimed at misleading results for absurd gain, or coupled with this sowing of panic and, together with the perverse illness, psychological damages of complex recovery. Right. So we see here the things that Spinelli talking about, the things that we already seen it. Authorities, leaders that are actually not really paying attention to what's going on with us, but to have their own gains. We are part of the workers preparing the future of humankind as we ourselves return to the beloved planet. Thus, complete dedication and selflessness will be required to install the kingdom of God on the earth on its way to regeneration. Some may say, perhaps, that this is a very egotistical way to see it or to help, right? Okay, I'm going to help because I'm going to go back to earth. But hey, guess what? It's part of us. I mean, if we want to come back to Earth, let us pave the way for us to come back to a better planet, right? And we're always reminded, right? Don't think that, what others have left for you, but think of what you can, leave for yourself in terms of, if I want to reincarnate and, re-encounter this planet later on, especially now that we know that if we're not doing the right things, we're going to be taken to a different planet, no longer the planet Earth, perhaps in worse conditions compared to planet Earth. We then have to think, let me do the right things here. Let me help. Let me connect with these higher minds. So many blessings constantly pour from heaven to benefit human minds, imparting the knowledge of the immortality of the soul and the laws that govern the universe. The higher minds are there to be able to connect with our incarnate brothers and sisters, transmitting courage and valor in this difficult time, as well as in other possible serious matters is an honor I recognize not to deserve. However, in view of the divine concession, I will strive to work in this field and see it grow, thriving and luminous, blessed by um, the Master of Nazareth. Again, very humble Spinelli saying to us, "Look, I know nothing, know very little in this regard, but I will do my best." And it begs us to look at it and say, sometimes we're presented with different tasks and we complain, right? And then in the natural meditative silence that followed one of our members, our brother Claudio, specialized in the application of bioenergy and a bearer of high virtues, inquired, "We will certainly find the virus related condition in souls entangled in subtle or serious spirit obsession processes amid great physical torments. How should we, though, um, how should we behave concerning our teamwork?" And then Spinelli finalizes by saying, "Our infirm brothers and sisters are the legacy of the martyrdom of our Lord Jesus Christ, who brings them to us, the heirs of his gospel, so that above all else we love them as if they were children of our hearts. We will seek to calm them with comforting passes and the inspiration to avoid self destructive and violent thoughts, which only worsens their condition. In many of the houses we will visit, invited by the Spiritist beliefs conveyed during the gospel at home for the purpose of creating defensive vibrations for the families, we will seek to inspire its members with trust in God and charitable work, especially related to the hungry and the disillusioned experiencing a wide range of nightmarish difficulties." I want to take a pause here, folks, that and kind of summarize in a way what not only we have studied, and I'm going to check my time here, what we have studied, um, what we are studying in this, in with these first couple chapters here, but also what we have seen with the previous two works that we have done in 2009 and 2020 and 2021 with the planetary transition, as well as with the book Dawn of a New Era. Recently, we were working, we were listening to a very interesting gentleman from the Spirit Federation of Brazil, and he was highlighting some interesting aspects of that we learn with Spiritism in terms of mediumship, right? And it has to do a lot with what we're seeing here. And I would like to just to make a point here and kind of connect with the passages that we saw and read at the beginning of the text or that we presented here. Number one of the things that he talks about is that, in this transition, right? Then when we talk about a planet or world of regeneration, what does it mean? I mean, many of us, we can go back to the gospel, we can go back to the Spirit's book and kind of like make our assumptions. But I heard him saying, and Daniel, if you can type the name of the gentleman here that that we were listening to. I believe one of the gentlemen who were responsible for the work of mediumship in the Spirit Federation of Brazil. But I don't remember his name. Daniel actually will type for us here. We'll remember. He was saying something really interesting that the plan of regeneration, we will understand or we will see the true characteristic of a planet of regeneration when we establish a solid solidarity between us, the incarnated ones, with the spiritual realm. And that to me was like, wow, I never heard of such a thing, right? Because it begs us to understand that, is it just, or to ask, is it just, technology? Is it just that perhaps we're going to be flying? Perhaps we're not going to need a phone anymore to connect with one another, right? Perhaps, you will see Leo coming to your house and perhaps, speaking right in front of you in terms of technology. Not that I want to enter your house. I mean, already entering your house, through technology here, but it will be more let's say, more solid, right? We'll be able to see more and connect in different ways. But it's beyond that. Perhaps the machinery won't matter anymore because we'll connect with in such a way with our minds and our hearts that it's like, wow, I know that perhaps Kirsten is thinking of me right now, or perhaps my cousin in Brazil would like to speak with me. Let's just, take a moment and stop, right? But most importantly, we will be well connected with the higher minds, right? Because one things that he also said is that if we think about it, perhaps towards the end of the transformational moments of the plan of regeneration, this is going to be thousands of years from now, hopefully in the last, thousands. But when we go from the transition of a planet of regeneration, right? Um, towards the end of its evolution, um, we don't need it to have the mediums, the mediumistic meanings anymore, because this connection will be so um, it will be so subtle that we're not going to have a need of a mediumistic meeting, right? We'll be so established, connected with the higher realms, that it's like, okay, I need help, I need guidance. And the guidance that we're going to be asking is not what's going to happen to me tomorrow. It's not for me to get a new job, or for me to analyze mundane ideas, or perhaps to talk about a virus that is actually affecting us. No, it's going to be more about how we become ever more connected with God. How do we get closer to Jesus, right? So, I wanted to bring this because, again, it connects with this whole message. And the reason we have the three books here, because we have been saying this over and over and over. And guess what? I have to say it over and over to myself, and I'll bring this to you with a kind heart to remind you that the things that we mentioned here earlier today, once human perception expands further, penetrating the various vibrational layers between the physical and the spirit world, it will enable the knowledge that life does not stop, that the idea of empty space is a result of the insufficiency of human senses, connecting with both realms, right? The senses that we only were so limited, only looking towards the physical, towards the now, without experiencing. When I say experience, it's not just think, okay, I'm a spiritist and I believe in the future. I believe that I will come back. But experience. When I say this, is at least for myself, it's mind blowing, because now I'm looking at it and saying, wow, experiencing a new life. I'm going to do the right things right now, that perhaps not only next year I will feel better, but in the next life as well. Thanks to human beings' intellectual and moral development, as we said earlier, as they become more receptive to beauty and reflection, right? Beauty in not the beauty that we connect, unfortunately, with planet Earth right now, but the beauty that Mr. Miranda is saying about nature. When we're reflective, when we're reflecting about ourselves, right? They also acquire more perception of the so-called paranormal phenomena, enabling a better attunement to the subtle vibrations that surround them. Over time, through the increased exercise of mediumistic capabilities, the phenomena will become normal, making the delicate physical sense more refined and transcendental. Interestingly enough, this week I was actually talking to a friend at work, and where she mentioned that out of nothing, she was going on with her day, and her sister's name came to mind. She just remembered, and she wrote down her sister's name twice. And then she went on to tell us that, she became a little bit concerned, and she went ahead and called her sister. Guess what? Her sister had actually just going through a little accident, and she was fine. Everything's fine. But she was able to connect with her sister. Yes, there is a connection already pre-established, one can say, two sisters connecting. But think of the future, us connecting that way. Oh my God, somebody's thinking of me, or I'm thinking of this person. Perhaps, there's a little bit more to it that we need to dive in it, right? And understand this connection. And this is what we're striving to do in terms of our connection with the spiritual realm, right? And this will be the actual the true highlight of a planet of regeneration. So, what is the call to action? How can we help ourselves? As we were saying in the beginning, what can we do physically? If it is too much for us to do mentally and spiritually, let us do physically. If there are any clutter in your life, and I say this in general, anything that is holding us back, let us get rid of. Let us really live and try to live a more light, ever light, I'll say the lighter life, right? Where things are not holding us back, right? If one can do this spiritually or mentally, let it is yes. If, as Joanna De Angelis tells us, if there is a thought, a negative thought that comes to mind or harbors our heart, let us replace it. Let us then think of something that is positive. Let us connect with Jesus. Let us connect with our mentors. If we need help, let us call one another. If we need help, let us watch, perhaps a session where someone like this, that someone can come and bring a new, enlightening ideas to all of us. So it's important for us to change our behaviors, change our perception about the world, because as we have seen here, throughout the two past books and at the beginning of this book right here, that they want to help us. They want to guide us despite all the craziness that is going on, despite all the malevolent beings that are around us, and they want to help us habilitate ourselves to avoid connecting with these negative minds. And one may think, so I can finalize this, so why are they here? Why are the negative elements or individuals or spirits are here? Well, number one, the grace of God allows us to try once more and make our decisions, right? Exercise our free will. But unfortunately, some spirits, they 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 want to continue in this path for a little bit longer than ourselves, right? And who are we to judge them? But we also have the capabilities to choose what's best for us, and that's how we connect with the higher minds, right? Allowing ourselves to do greater works, more uplifting exercises in life, and things that will connect with us. Remember, the 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 gardens that are presented here, the nature that is presented by Manuel Miranda, it doesn't just appears there. For a location to become of such a magnitude in general terms, as he brings here, and he analyzes some of the points, there's a lot of work to be done to get to that point, right? We all know that perhaps for us to sit down right now and watch this talk, we went through a lot today. We went through quite a bit, taking care of our physical bodies, taking care of our homes, taking care of family members, dealing with the feelings of others, dealing with our feelings. So it's not easy. So we wish that this moment that we spent here together have allowed you to enter, our difficulties and get curious about ourselves and say, what can I do to connect with these higher minds? We know what's going on. We know that there is a pandemic, not only in terms of a virus, but there are several other pandemics that are harboring our lives right now. Ignorance being one, and we can always liberate ourselves as we connect with these higher minds and as we connect with one another. With no further ado, then, we have covered the introduction, the chapters 1 through 4, and we are already excited to next month bring timely clarifications and explanation of events. On that note, I would like to bring Kirsten here for some questions and comments.
Well, our first comment is wow. Wow. We read this chapter before Leo, beforehand, and it still wows us, the information. But this isn't about me. This is about the Dr. Miranda's, the information he brought. So let's dive into some of the comments and some of the questions. I'm still processing once again. So we have some people that are just saying hello. So shout out to Alba and Yasko and everyone else that was saying hello. But let's go ahead right to one of and then we have Paula. I don't know if you wanted to comment on this, but I noticed that too. The initial chapter that you read, the first chapter that you read, it was a second reference to a lab origin. Um, yeah. Oh, I can't hear you, Leo.
I was unmuting myself. Sorry.
Okay.
A second reference to a lab origin.
Yeah, because in the previous chapter it referenced the lab.
Yeah, well, I believe she's talking about the what they have mentioned about the, and I think we touched base on this as well, that in terms of the the virus being generated or created in a lab. Is that what I believe? That's what she's referring to.
I yeah, I believe so.
She's talking about page 57 at the end there. Is that what it is? Page 57, where are the unhappy brothers going to? No, that's not it. Okay. I believe
Yeah.
that's what it is. Maybe she can clarify her question there. And sorry about my flickering. Um, my my connection is not well established.
But let's move on to actually another question she poses, or another question she poses. She says, "Does quote more receptive to beauty and reflection end quote mean mindfulness, silence, and observation, meditation?"
Paula, I gotta tell you, thank for the hint, because I am still trying to understand this too. I believe, what's the name of the author? Talks about a spirit that talks about art. What's the name of the author?
Oh,
For next time,
Leon Denis.
Leon Denis. Yes,
Mhm.
and it takes us into this understanding what beauty is. Talks about we have studied this. I believe Alba talked about this topic at the SSB before, and it kind of like leads us to a better understanding of what this reception to beauty truly is, right? And this reflection, I think that what I would say, this receptive to beauty would be the analysis, right? To truly be aware of what's around you. And we think that beauty is a green field, or perhaps the ocean, or but life is presenting itself in so many ways that we're not aware yet, and it's okay not to be aware. The thing is, I think that Manuel Miranda is giving us the hint. Let us be aware, to the moment, be mindfulness, as you're saying here. And then in terms of the reflection, is to internalize this, and to say, how do I bring this to my heart? How do I live this moment, right? And that can be in the moment in itself, as well as later on. This can be, when we look at somebody's eyes, right? This can be and truly look at somebody's eyes, and you will see how beautiful it is. It's funny because this crossed my mind when I was actually, this was the last session when we presented. I had my eyes dilated right before the session. Unfortunately, I was going through something that I had to get that work done in my eyes, and the doctor was actually showing me the picture of the eye, and I was thinking, oh my God gave me these two beautiful eyes, and they working. It was just an amazing thing. I was like, oh, wowed, right? And I have this doctor in front of me who went to school and study all these things. So at least to me, I was reflecting, I was internalizing all that it was in front of me. Yes, I was going through a lot of technical terms, and he was explaining to me. I was overwhelmed, worry about the meeting as well, that I had to present here with everyone later on. But to say the least, is this reflection, right? Being in the moment. What a beautiful thing, right? And we these are things that sometimes we don't pay attention. So yes, I think that I'm glad that you brought this, because I am still learning, right? Reflection for you will be different, reflection for Kirsten, reflection for all of us will be different. But I think that the moment that we bring to our heart and we start thinking and analyzing, not with just reason, but what kind of feelings that brings to you, right? bring the reason, but also how does that make us feel, right? And describe it. I think it's important for happy, unsecured, right? And then you start getting yourself connected with it, and you learn more about yourself. You learn more about others, and in general about the universe as well. So I hope that helps. I'm looking for the. Okay, I found it. Okay, go ahead.
Let's go on to thank you for that, Leah. Let's go on to a question brought by Yasko. She says in chapter 3, regarding the effects of the special environment surrounding the Institute on the paraspiritual constitution, I wonder if I can enjoy such paraspiritual aid if I create inside my apartment a nature environment with trees, flowers, insects, not only with vases of plants, but say by playing and watching a video with all these elements.
Be careful with what you wish for. You can, but but not necessarily. We yet have a full. I would like to say I don't, because mosquitoes, they do sometimes can be very annoying, or bugs, right? We were talking about yesterday, when we go to Assateague sometimes, for some of you who does not know, here the let's call it the Eastern Shore, one of the beaches of Maryland. It's called Assateague. It's a beautiful place, but there are some, a couple of times that I went there, there are so many bugs. There really, you really have to be uh, in sync, to say the least, with nature in order not to be bugged out. So, we have to analyze, what we want to bring into our lives and how we perceive it. I have a friend. He actually went. He's a biologist, and he doesn't mind. He actually do excursions. He goes to places that are in certain to a certain degree, not a place that I want to be. Dealing with plants and different kinds, but he loves it, right? So it's not for everybody that I'm saying. But in terms of an environment, yes, we can, to a certain degree. And I say this because there are, when I say environment, you have to include everyone around you as well. But it's doable. Let's think of this, right? This location where they are, the physical and the spiritual around this physical location, in terms of the spiritist center, right? There's a lot of work being done, and there has been a lot of work done to get to them to that level. So number one, it's not something that's going to happen overnight. Number two, there is a constant work being done, because there are the influences of, attacks of different groups of spirits, and I'm talking about incarnated and discarnated ones, that continue to vibrate in different ways and affect us, right? If you are trying to lead, for example, a God at home, reading a good passage of the Bible, whatever spirit's book you have, or whatever book you choose, and your neighbor is playing, loud music, uh, there will be some difficult moments where you're going to have to knock on the neighbor's door and say, "Can we lower down the music a little bit?" Right? So I'm just giving this egotistic, example, that it will take a lot of work. And this is one of the things that we need to work within ourselves, to understand our limitations, to understand the limitations of others, but nonetheless, to be courageous enough to, yes, establish this environment in our own homes. If it's doable on the other side, if it's doable for a spiritist center, perhaps a religious institution, or let us even think of, great examples of businesses, well established and well maintained business on planet Earth. Why do they thrive? Why do they continue to exist and continue to uh, lead despite the competition? It's because they're reinventing themselves. They continue, they push through, they come up with new ideas, new ways to do businesses, and I think this is an example for us to also. And I'm entering my business degree here, but it is true, right? When we establish a mission statement to ourselves, I want to create a better environment for myself. Now you have to worry about, the objectives of this mission statements, right? How are you going to do it? The what, the how, right? So that's, some of the alerts that I can bring. But to answer your question, yes, we can. We certainly can bring plants. We certainly can bring life into our homes, right? A pet or whatever it is that will bring us happiness, and it will change the environment. We can play soft music, and anything that will soothe the environment and connect with the higher minds. Yes, thank you.
Well said. Well said. And then I'm going to bring a question from Paula. She mentions on page 57,
Mhm.
she asks, where are the unhappy brothers going to when they have to leave their infernal regions?
That I do not know. And it's not revealed to us. A passage from the Bible that Jesus taught us, that in my Father's home there are many mansions, right? In my Father's mansions,
Mhm.
or there are many homes, the other way
Many
around.
homes.
Sorry.
No,
Right.
yeah, in my father's home there are many mansions. Yeah.
Many mansions. Thank you. And we also have to understand that there are planets also going through the same transitions that we went through when we went from a primitive world to a planet of trials and expiation, right? Planet Earth has gone through this transition. We were a primitive planet where we actually were fighting the elements. We're fighting one another to, maintain our cave, to maintain our clan, right? And then we were start making strides in terms of we were able to establish communication, right? Verbal communication, written communications, and to separate ourselves into groups and do different things, create tools, right? And we evolved more, and then we are no longer, the cave individuals, the spirits that are recently created by God, right? Then now we organize ourselves a little bit more, that we start to face trials, to learn, as well as to rescue the things that perhaps we have done to the environment, to one another. Now, what has happened on planet Earth that we saw that strikes us until today? We have civilizations that came to live on Earth that they were way more advanced than ourselves. These individuals, these spirits, were also brought from other planets, much like we are right now at the end of a planet of regional of expiation and trials, right? That they could no longer be in those planets, and they were brought to planet Earth. What happened? In turn, they were able to morally evolve, and they were also able to bring technological advancements and different types of advancements to planet Earth that we were in need of that time, right? Now, the opposite is happening. For those who are no longer morally vibrating morally with us, they are going to be going to other planets. Now, exactly where this is, we don't know, but we know that it's happening little by little. More frequent than not. As we have seen, with these teachings of Manuel and Miranda. But it's really not up to us to know. I think it's up to us to, number one, to regenerate ourselves so that we continue to be part of a planet of regeneration, and pray for them, because some of them may be some of our loved ones, right? That unfortunately are not really walking the talk or walking along with the great masses in terms of doing the good that they're being invited to do.
Wow. Well said, Leo.
I
Well
thought that,
said.
sorry if it was a little bit long.
No, 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 not at all. No, I think that was really well said. It looks like there's a comment here from Alba. This might have been related to something you might have mentioned about prayer. Not she just was mentioning the Angelus hour is 6 p.m. Aquatic Radio has our daily prayer live program, which we pray together at 6 p.m.
Very well said, Alba. This also crossed my mind when you said it, because in Latin countries, we have the established moment at a 6 o'clock in Brazil is very evident, right? In the Catholic community, where 6 o'clock is reserved for Mother Mary to stop and pray, right? But it's we can do this at any time of our lives. We can establish at 9 o'clock at night. We can establish at a specific time of in the morning. That we will stop and pray. And if we do this on a regular basis, well, whether it's a regular basis or not, I mean, if we're just praying, we'll connect with God. But if it happens on a regular basis, other minds will connect with us, right? So it's truly important that and it's really nice that you mentioned the work of cardiac radio, because yeah, we can stop and connect. Well, 6 o'clock, I'm gonna stop for 10-15 minutes and I will pray. It's and think of this as well, because sometimes I'm listening to some other radio station, spiritist radio station in Brazil. 6 o'clock over there is 4 o'clock here, since we know we have 2 hour difference, right? Pretty soon it's going to be only 1 hour, so 5 o'clock, we can stop as well. 4 o'clock, we can stop. And what if this prayer is in Japan? Guess what? It's going to be a different time. So anytime is time to pray. And it's best that we do it often at an organized manner. So the organization of the higher minds will say, yeah, go over there. This is a moment that they're praying. Perhaps serve them with some of the joyous feelings and, that you are bringing from the higher realms. But thanks for the question.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's so much food for thought with this book, and just these 2 chapters alone, Leo, that I feel like I'm not sure if I'm echoing some other um, people that are watching, that there's just so much just to take in and process and sit with, and really ask ourselves, how and how does this information land on us, and what can we do? How can we utilize it to become the best version of ourselves? Um, we have one last question actually from Yasko. Um, and then I think I'll ask you to give your final thoughts, and then we'll end with the prayer. But Yasko asks, is the massive discarnation by COVID-19 or the coronavirus accelerating the separation of the tare, the weed, from wheat, not allowing some to reincarnate on planet Earth?
One can say so, Yasko. I think that's a good way to put it, right? Because that's also a passage of the Bible that we learn, right, to separate, the good from the bad, and to make sure that we are, um, you know, doing the same within ourselves, right? Um, I think that we're all getting to a point of our lives that we are tired. We're very tired, but it is in this tiredness that we can sometimes lose ourselves. And I say this because we think that the problem is always out there, right? But we have also the weed inside of us, and it is this sometimes that little weed that can multiply, right? We see this when we're treating grass, when we're treating certain plantations, you name it. But that little weed can turn into something so big that will really affect the whole, in such a disastrous way that it takes a while for you to go ahead and uproot all those bad weeds. So if anything, what I would say is for us to do that transformation inside of us, to really look, okay, this is something that can lead into a problem. So if I like to do certain things that are still very mundane, right, throw it away, put it aside. Ask yourself, what are the results of this if I do this, if I think this way, if I connect with the negative side of a situation or of a person, right? And yes, we're humans, we will do it, but I think it's important for us to analyze within ourselves. And yes, God, through God's grace, um, it is happening. I mean, it's there's no other way to put it. But we really have to pay attention to this and pray for them as well, because we also hope that they can imagine if they're doing an internship into a new world, and if they do it so well that they will be able to come back to planet Earth, right? And I say this because Bezerra de Menezes actually, um, one of his, and we know he's author and he has worked a lot with, and actually in the last book, Dawn on a New Era, he was actually conducting the work. He was also in a position to, reach higher realms, but he wanted to stay on planet Earth to help the minds and hearts who are still here, afflicted and suffering. And he decided to stay with them. This goes to show us that the grace of God, there are helpers out there that understand our sufferings, right? And these minds, they're not going to be forgotten. They're not going to be, they're not going to a disposal planet, right? That it's going to be like, okay, now forget it. No, they will also evolve, and who knows? a, a billion of years from now, they're going to be Christ-like, spirits, just like we will be. Who knows? Perhaps they, when they go back to that, when they go to that planet, they will take a leap much higher than ours because they're going to be facing difficulties that we haven't faced yet. Thank God, right? Everybody have their own paths. But to finalize this, what I would like to say is that let us do our work. Let us do what is attainable to us as well, because what's important for me may not be important for others. What is easy for me may be very hard for others, and it is. And then with a humble eye and heart that we say these final words. And I'm going to read this passage by Spinelli, and then we'll finalize with our prayer. Spinelli, after he read the passage from the Gospel, as we read earlier, says the following: Peace be with us. We always refer to the miseries that befall us in the process of evolution, forgetting that they are the spurious fruits of our own behavior. Our Heavenly Father provides us with reincarnation in order to prepare us for the glory that is reserved to us. However, the sickly inheritances of the initial process remain, dominating our inner landscapes and thrusting us into the abysses of imbalance and folly. If we understood the need for confidence in the future, we would stay away in the present from the lower passions that imprison us in the tears of inferiority. If we trusted in God, we would adopt the behavior taught and lived by Jesus, and surely our burden would be light and without fatigue. This is why Spiritism is the doctrine of consolation, similar to what Jesus exemplified, helping us to act rightly without the vain expectation that spirit mentors will miraculously solve our problems, understanding that it is up to us to find the solutions. May the Lord bless us all, and we ask, our dear Creator, this is our words now, saying, thank you, dear Lord, for this amazing moment that we had, the opportunity to read, comprehend, ask questions, connect with one another, and most importantly, to have you and one another to be part of this great transition in our lives. We thank you, and so be it.